The snow had fallen softly that Christmas Eve, blanketing our small Ohio town in a postcard-perfect stillness. Inside the Dawson family home it was anything but still. The fireplace crackled, scented candles flickered on every mantel, and Bing Crosby crooned gently from the old stereo system my dad refused to replace. My sister Emily was already there when I arrived, standing in the center of the living room like she owned the place. She always did. Her coat was a tailored camel wool blend that probably cost more than my entire December rent, and she was beaming in that effortless, polished way she did so well. Everyone lit up when she walked in. When I walked in, they just paused the music. I placed the pie I brought on the counter, brushed the snow off my sleeves, and offered a soft, "Hi." Mom hugged me quickly, brief and polite like an obligatory handshake. Dad didn't even look up from his scotch. Sophie, Emily's daughter, ran up and hugged my legs. At least someone noticed. I knelt and hugged her tightly, holding her a little longer than she expected. "Merry Christmas, Bug," I whispered. We gathered around the tree after dinner, the same ritual every year. Hot cider, matching pajamas that I suspected Mom only started buying after Pinterest made it trendy, and the big reveal. The gifts. Emily was handed a thick cream-colored envelope. My parents watched eagerly as she opened it. I saw the airline logo before she even gasped. "Switzerland," she squealed, looking up. "Really? Again?" My mom beamed. "We wanted you to have another opportunity to expand your global network. You've been working so hard, sweetie." Dad nodded like he was sending her off on a diplomatic mission instead of her third luxury vacation this year. "It's an investment in your future," he said. Then, almost as an afterthought, Mom turned to me. "And we got you something that might help you too, Claire." She handed me a small, squishy package wrapped in reused Santa paper. I smiled like I always do when I'm trying not to cry. Inside was a paperback book with a cartoon woman on the cover. Messy bun, glitter wand in one hand, juice box in the other. Bills floated around her head like a chaotic halo. The title, How to Grow Up. The subtitle, Stop Being a Toddler in a Grown-Up Body. Charming. The room fell silent, waiting for my reaction. I nodded, held up the book like it was just what I needed, and forced a laugh. "Thanks. This feels very on brand." Mom chuckled, clearly not sensing the sting. "I read it already. I bought a second copy for a coworker who still uses smiley faces in work emails. Thought of you instantly." Dad sipped his scotch. Emily was already scrolling on her phone. This wasn't new. If my life had a holiday theme, it would be an afterthought Christmas. Last year, Emily got a MacBook for her business degree. I got a laminated to-do list for reorganizing the garage, handwritten in Comic Sans no less. I worked full-time at Little Roots Preschool, in a sticky, chaotic wonderland of finger paint and glitter glue. On weekends I used to do children's birthday parties, balloon animals, fairy wings, the whole 9 yards. "You're the only adult I know who owns 6 pairs of sparkly wings and no winter coat," Emily once joked. My parents called it the clown job, even though I never once dressed as a clown. I respected myself more than that. And the kids respected me too. I had scaled back on party gigs lately, not because I'd outgrown them but because I didn't have time. Most of my weekends were spent babysitting Sophie. For free, of course. "It takes a village," Mom liked to say. Apparently, I was the entire village. Babysitter, emergency contact, emotional support goat. Meanwhile, Emily got to be the rising star, the brilliant daughter, the one they invested in. I got self-help books with insulting titles. I sat there, book in lap, smiling too hard, heart beating too loud. The tree lights blinked rhythmically beside me, casting soft glows that felt mocking now. No one noticed I hadn't said a word in 10 minutes. No one noticed the pages of that stupid book trembling in my hands. Maybe they thought I was touched. Maybe they thought I was finally learning. But something broke open in me that night. Something small and quiet, but sharp like a glass ornament falling in slow motion. I stared at the glitter-covered woman on the book cover, her eyes wide and helpless, and I saw myself. And that was the moment I knew they had no idea who I was. But they were about to find out. By the time the dishes were done and the house quieted into its late-night hum, I sat alone in the guest room, knees drawn up on the twin bed I used to sleep in as a kid. It hadn't changed much. Same faded wallpaper with little stars, same chipped bookshelf where my trophies never stood. Emily's room had been renovated twice since she moved out. Mine had stayed exactly the same. I guess they figured I wouldn't amount to enough to need new walls. I scrolled absently through my phone, dodging photos of families opening gifts together, kids unwrapping puppies, couples kissing under fairy lights. I tapped on Emily's Instagram. She'd already posted a photo of her Switzerland surprise, complete with the caption, "Another global adventure thanks to my amazing parents." The comments were full of heart emojis and dream family replies. My stomach turned. There was nothing new about this dynamic. Our family had always run on an unspoken hierarchy. Emily was the chosen one. Firstborn, overachiever, future CEO in heels. I was the support crew. When she got into Columbia, they threw a party with custom cupcakes and a catered brunch. When I was accepted to a local community college with a scholarship, Mom barely looked up from her gardening gloves. "That's nice," she'd said. "Maybe you can transfer to a real university later." But I never got the chance. The scholarship covered my first year and I planned to save for the next. I worked part-time at a daycare, babysat in the evenings, squirreled away every dollar. Then one day the money was just gone. Dad said the account had lost value due to market shifts. I didn't question it. I just adjusted, stepped out of school and never went back. Years later I'd learned the truth, but that part of the story was still waiting to hit me. Back in the living room that night, I'd heard Dad talking to Emily, glass of scotch in hand, voice low but proud. "We did what we had to do. You were always the better investment. And it paid off, didn't it?" Emily laughed softly. "Of course it did. Thanks, Dad." I blinked back, tears, swallowing the bile of old disappointments. That word, investment, played on a loop in my mind. Like I was some failed stock, a bad bet they regretted. Not a daughter. A sunk cost. I remembered last Christmas when Emily had unwrapped a new MacBook for her grad school research. I got a bright green clipboard with a handwritten list titled, "Garage Organization Ideas." Each task outlined with bullet points in Comic Sans. "You always liked projects," Mom said when I stared at it. "Now you've got one." They'd always framed these insults as kindness, tiny digs wrapped in holiday bows. When I taught preschoolers, they called it glorified babysitting. When I hosted birthday parties dressed as a fairy princess, they laughed. "Still playing dress up at 30, huh?" Dad had said once, not realizing I'd heard him. What they didn't understand was that I loved my work. Kids didn't judge. They didn't care about resumes or LinkedIn profiles. They cared if you listened, if you danced like an idiot, if you remembered their favorite crayon color. And I was good at it. I gave joy to those kids, real, messy, glitter-smeared joy. But none of that counted in my family. Not unless it could be printed on a business card and pinned to a refrigerator with pride. That night I helped put Sophie to bed. She snuggled into her pillow, clutching the plush unicorn I'd given her last year. "Auntie Claire," she whispered, "I want to grow up and be a fairy like you." My heart twisted. I kissed her forehead and tucked the blanket higher. "Then you're already halfway there," I whispered. I lingered in the hallway after, listening to Emily's voice drifting from downstairs, talking to Mom about upgrading Sophie's daycare to a real preschool with better outcomes. Mom nodded along. "Claire means well," she said. But she never really had direction. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there letting the words burn through me like acid. Then I turned and walked into the guest room, shut the door and reached for the book they gave me. How to Grow Up. I flipped to the first chapter. It was some garbage about accountability, sprinkled with jokes about adulting and cartoon doodles of overdue bills. But one line stood out. "The first step to growing up is recognizing who gets to define you, and who doesn't." I closed the book, stared at the ceiling and breathed in the silence. Maybe I didn't have a master's degree or a passport full of stamps, but I knew who I was. And it wasn't their failure to fix. I wasn't the child who needed to grow up. I was the adult they had underestimated. And that was about to change. The morning after Christmas, the house was quiet except for the low hum of the furnace and the occasional creak of old floorboards. I was in the kitchen reheating leftover coffee when I heard voices from the den. Mom and Emily talking in hushed tones, the kind of low-volume conversation that makes you lean in without realizing it. I wasn't eavesdropping, not intentionally. I was just walking past when I caught a single sentence that rooted me in place. "Good thing we used Claire's college fund back then." "I don't think she ever noticed," Mom said. My breath caught. "I mean, she wasn't really using it," she continued casually, like she was discussing leftover cranberry sauce. "And Emily needed that money. It was just sitting there collecting dust. I always felt guilty about it, Emily admitted, though her tone lacked remorse. But at least it helped me finish grad school. Totally worth it. I backed away slowly, like the floor might collapse beneath me. My hands trembled as I placed the coffee mug on the counter, quietly enough not to draw attention, then turned toward the hallway. My heart pounded as I climbed the stairs and slipped into the home office, Dad's old study. It hadn't changed in years. Walnut desk, dusty bookshelves, a single lamp with a torn shade. Everything smelled faintly of scotch and printer ink. I went straight to the filing cabinet in the corner. Bottom drawer. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for until I found it. A faded manila folder labeled Education Accounts. Inside, a stack of documents, bank statements, and fund transfer forms. I flipped through them, breath shallow. And there was a transfer slip dated May 12, 2008. $42,000 moved from an account under my name, Claire Dawson, to a joint account held by Richard and Nancy Dawson. The memo line read, "Reallocation, Emily tuition advance." My stomach dropped. I sat back on the floor, folder in my lap, as the truth unspooled in my mind like a movie I hadn't realized I was starring in. That year I'd been planning my second semester of college. I remember logging into my student portal and finding my balance unpaid, aid mysteriously reduced. Dad said the market crashed. Said it wasn't the right time. I believed him. I dropped out. And Emily flew to New York. I stared at the signature on the transfer form. My dad's handwriting, firm and familiar. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. They'd chosen her. They'd looked at their 2 daughters and made a calculated decision. They'd stolen my future and called it practical. The shock morphed into something heavier, darker. I didn't feel rage, not yet. I felt something deeper. A hollowing out. Like I'd been scraped clean. Years of buried disappointment rose to the surface all at once. Missed milestones, half chances, self-doubt I'd thought I created on my own. It had all been rooted in this theft of trust, of possibility. I stuffed the document into my tote bag. I didn't know why. Maybe instinct, maybe evidence. Then I stood up, smoothed my shirt, and walked back downstairs. The house was still in its quiet post-holiday haze. I passed by the den. Emily was on the couch, laughing softly into her phone. Mom was on the other side, sipping coffee and flipping through a travel catalog. Neither of them looked up. That night we had one of those lazy leftover dinners. Reheated ham, cranberry sauce in a glass dish, the same small talk we always defaulted to. Sophie was the only spark of joy in the room. She'd drawn a picture of me, stick figure, fairy wings and all, and handed it to me proudly. "I made this for you, Auntie Claire. You're magic," she said. I hugged her tightly, my throat catching. "Thank you, sweetheart." After she went to bed, Mom turned to me and said, "We're thinking of putting Sophie in a new preschool. Something more rigorous, you know? Not all that play-based fluff." I blinked. "Play-based fluff? You know what I mean," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "We want her somewhere with structure. Goals. Outcomes. Not just glitter glue and story time." "Right," I murmured. "Because God forbid she ends up like me." Mom laughed, not realizing I wasn't joking. "Exactly." I excused myself a moment later, heart pounding in my ears. Upstairs, I pulled the document from my bag and laid it flat on the bedspread. My name. My fund. My stolen chance. I had believed for years that I'd just failed to launch. That I didn't try hard enough or didn't dream big enough. But the truth was crueler than failure. The truth was betrayal. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel powerless. I felt awake. The next morning started like most holiday hangovers. Too quiet, too bright, and layered with the kind of tension that made every spoon scrape and floorboard creak feel louder than it should. I waited until everyone was distracted. Dad out back with the snowblower, Emily on another video call, Sophie busy building a glitter-covered Lego castle in the den. Then found Mom alone in the kitchen rinsing berries for breakfast. Her back was to me, humming some old song from the 80s she used to play when we were kids. For a second I almost turned around. Almost. "Mom," I said, voice sharp low. She turned, smile already forming, until she saw my face. "I found the transfer slip," I said. She blinked. "What?" "The money. The college fund. You took it. For Emily." There was a pause. One beat too long. Then she sighed and turned back to the sink. "Oh, Claire," she said softly. Don't make this into a thing. My stomach twisted. A thing? You stole my future. You lied to me. It wasn't like that, she said, reaching for a towel. You weren't using the money. You didn't have direction back then. Emily had goals. She had potential. I stepped closer. And I didn't? She turned, exasperated now. You were always floating, Claire. You flitted from one interest to another. That theater phase. The costume parties. Teaching preschool. You never had a plan. I had a plan, I snapped. It just didn't look like hers. Her eyes narrowed. That's the problem. You never tried to be more. You settled. No, I said, voice trembling. You settled. You decided I wasn't worth betting on. You took my shot and handed it to her like I didn't even exist. She made something of herself, Mom said, sharper now. She proved us right. I laughed. Bitter. You want to talk proof? I've worked nonstop since I was 18. No loans. No handouts. No luxury trips or networking mentors. I built my life from scratch, glue sticks and all. That's not a career, she scoffed. That's survival. My hands clenched at my sides. You don't get to define that. You don't get to shame me for making something out of the scraps you left. And then, without warning, she raised her hand and slapped me. It wasn't hard. It wasn't dramatic. But it was loud. We both froze. And then a tiny voice behind us broke the silence. Auntie Claire. I turned slowly. Sophie stood at the doorway holding a half-finished drawing, eyes wide. I swallowed. Hey, sweetie. Are you a failure? She asked, quiet and confused. My chest cracked open. I didn't look at my mother. I walked past her, bent down to Sophie's level, and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. No, I said. I'm just someone who believed the wrong people for too long. She handed me the drawing. It was a stick figure fairy with long hair and silver wings. This is you, she said. I hugged her tightly. Thanks, Bug. I stood, met Mom's eyes one last time. She looked shaken but not sorry. Don't worry, I said. You won't have to worry about me failing anymore. I'm done trying for your approval. I packed that afternoon, methodical and silent. I didn't slam doors. I didn't cry. I left the book on my nightstand, right next to the drawing from Sophie and a note she wouldn't understand yet. Dear Sophie, be kind. Be wild. Be loud. Don't let anyone shrink you. Love, Auntie Claire. I tucked a pair of my fairy wings in the hallway closet just for her. And then I walked out without saying goodbye. It was just after dusk when I slipped out the front door, my breath curling in the icy air like ghost trails. The town lay blanketed in snow, twinkling in the orange glow of porch lights and fading Christmas decorations. My boots crunched across the driveway with finality. No one came out to stop me. No one even noticed. The same family who once panicked when Emily was 5 minutes late for curfew hadn't bothered to ask why I'd spent the whole day packing in silence. I started the engine of my old Honda, let the heat tick upward, and stared at the house through the windshield. That house had raised me, ignored me, judged me, and diminished me, but now it would no longer define me. Inside my bag were the transfer documents, the drawing Sophie gave me, and a printed photo from a birthday party I'd worked last spring. Me in a lavender gown and glitter wings, surrounded by children mid-laughter. It wasn't a resume, but it was proof of something real, something joyful, something mine. I left no big announcement, no confrontation with my father, no dramatic final scene. Just one last message left behind. A letter taped to the fridge, folded neatly in an envelope labeled to the ones who never saw me. Read. You always said I needed to grow up. So I did. I just didn't need your version of it. I wish things could have been different. But wishing doesn't build futures. Action does. I'm choosing mine now. As I pulled out of the driveway, my rearview mirror caught the flicker of movement. Sophie's small face, framed by the upstairs window, hand pressed to the glass. I didn't know if she understood why I was leaving. But part of me hoped that someday she'd remember the fairy wings I left for her, the stories I used to tell, the way I always made time. Maybe when she was older she'd realize I wasn't running away. I was walking toward something. The highway felt endless that night. I drove for hours without knowing where I was headed. Somewhere that didn't carry the weight of old wounds. Somewhere that didn't echo with judgment in every corner. I stopped once. Cheap gas station, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror, bleary-eyed and numb. But there was something new in my reflection too. Clarity. I wasn't broken. I was becoming. By morning I was 2 states over, parked at a rest stop overlooking a frozen lake. I sat on a bench wrapped in every layer I owned, sipped vending machine coffee and stared out at the ice. It cracked faintly as the sun rose. A reminder that even frozen things shift eventually. I opened my laptop, heart pounding. Typed in the name of an arts community I'd bookmarked months ago but never dared apply to. A small creative center in Chicago offering part-time housing and startup grants for childhood education programs. They ran storytime circles, puppet theater, art therapy sessions. It wasn't glamorous, but it was everything I loved wrapped in one opportunity. I filled out the form in one long sitting, uploading my references, my background, and even scanned in Sophie's drawing as part of my statement. When I hit submit, I didn't feel fear. I felt relief. Back on the road, I passed signs for cities I'd only ever seen on license plates. Every mile that distanced me from my childhood home felt like oxygen in my lungs. The world was bigger than my parents' kitchen table. Bigger than Emily's LinkedIn profile. Bigger than the version of me they decided not to believe in. And the more space I put between us, the more I realized I didn't need closure. I needed momentum. I turned on the radio. A Christmas song came on. One of those slow ones that used to make me nostalgic. But this time it just sounded like background noise. I rolled down the window and let the cold slap my face, laughing for the first time in weeks. I wasn't afraid anymore. Let them think I disappeared. Let them wonder what happened. They'd find out soon enough. It took 3 days for the calls to start. At first they trickled in, missed calls from Mom, then Dad, then Emily. No voicemails. Just the ringing, unanswered, a digital echo of something they hadn't noticed in person. Then the text came. Claire, where are you? Call us, please. This isn't funny. I didn't reply. I let them pile up like unopened mail. I wasn't trying to punish them. I just didn't owe them a reaction. Not anymore. By the 4th day, Mom's tone shifted from irritation to worry. You've made your point. Please just let us know you're safe. Emily's messages were shorter, sharper. You're scaring Sophie. At least say goodbye properly. Then the one that made my stomach drop. She's asking if she broke you. That one I couldn't ignore. I typed and deleted a dozen replies before finally settling on a single sentence. Tell her I'm okay. And it's not her fault. It never was. I hit send. Nothing more. That night my phone buzzed again. A new number. A message I almost didn't open until I saw the name. Jeremy Bauman. Attorney at law. I'd contacted him in a haze of clarity the morning after I left, sent him scanned documents, transfer slips, and a rough timeline of what had happened with the education fund. He specialized in family financial abuse, specifically in cases of underage misappropriation and trust fraud. At the time, I wasn't even sure I'd go through with it. But now it felt less like vengeance and more like truth finding its voice. The message was brief. Call me. You have a case. We spoke the next morning. Jeremy was calm, direct, methodical. He asked questions I hadn't prepared for. Did I have access to any written communication about the fund? Had I ever signed anything? Were there witnesses to the conversation between my parents and Emily? I told him about the documents I found, the overheard discussion in the kitchen, the years of dismissive behavior. You won't recover the years, he said gently. But you may recover the value. And more importantly, you'll make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being seen, being acknowledged, taking the label of disappointment they'd stamped across my life and tearing it in half. I gave him the go-ahead. We started the paperwork. Meanwhile, I moved into a shared space for artists and educators in Chicago, just a temporary rental above a converted theater. The apartment was small, the heater clicked like a dying insect, and my view overlooked a laundromat. But I slept better than I had in years. I busied myself building something new. I partnered with a local early learning nonprofit, pitched a program based on imaginative play and storytelling for underfunded preschools. I brought in my wings again. Glitter returned to my life, not as a joke but as a tool. One parent called my classroom a factory of joy. That felt right. One afternoon in January, I checked the family group chat for the first time. It had exploded. Claire took money from a lawyer? What is this? Dad, She's trying to sue us? Emily, this is ridiculous. She's bitter. Don't engage. Then one message stood out. A private text from Emily. You're going to tear this family apart. For what? A few grand? A grudge. I didn't respond. But I did smile. The irony wasn't lost on me. After all these years of being told I was childish, they were the ones now throwing tantrums. I wasn't tearing anything apart. I was finally stepping out of the wreckage they'd built and left me to survive in. A week later, my lawyer informed me that a formal letter had been delivered to my parents. A request for mediation. No courtroom yet. Just a chance to settle quietly. Fairly. Privately. Later that night, another message came through. Please call me. We had no idea you were this serious. But I was. And I always had been. They just never believed me long enough to see it. January faded into February and Chicago remained frozen in the kind of cold that seeped into your spine. But inside the small community center where I now spent most of my days, something warm was always in motion. The pilot program I'd proposed, Little Wings, Imagination Through Play, had officially launched. We had 12 kids, aged 3 to 6, a rotating schedule of storytelling, music, costume days, and what I affectionately dubbed Wonder Breaks. It wasn't the most prestigious job. There were no LinkedIn accolades or polished press releases. But every time a child hugged me with paint on their hands or begged for one more story, I felt like I'd won something bigger than any award. Freedom. My own version of success. The community noticed. A local parent group wrote a glowing piece in their newsletter. A place where children don't just learn, they shine. It made its way to a school district administrator. Then to a radio show. And eventually, to the inbox of a donor who offered to fund a second location. We were only 3 weeks in. It was happening fast. But not once did I feel unworthy. I felt ready. One night I came home to find an envelope under my door. No name. No return address. Inside was a card handwritten in familiar blocky letters. Sophie. Dear Auntie Claire. Mommy says you're starting something big for little people. I think that's cool. I told my class that my aunt is a fairy who makes schools. My teacher smiled and said she wants to meet you. Love, Sophie. P.S. I still have your wings. I wear them when I miss you. I pressed the card to my chest and let myself cry, not from sadness but from something gentler. A grief that had finally exhaled. Maybe someday Sophie would understand why I left. Maybe she already did. Kids notice more than we think. The next day I wore my own wings to class. Just for fun. The kids went wild. A little boy named Miles asked, Miss Claire, are you a real fairy or just pretend? I crouched beside him and said, the best ones are always a little bit of both. That afternoon while the kids napped and snow dusted the windows, I opened my email. A message from Jeremy. Mediation was scheduled. My parents had agreed to meet. No formal apology. No admission. Just business as always. So it was a start. The email sat unread for another day before I responded. I wasn't avoiding it. I was choosing not to let it consume me. Growth didn't mean I had to confront every demon the moment it called my name. Sometimes healing meant choosing my own timing. My own terms. I spent that week writing a proposal to expand Little Wings into low-income neighborhoods. I used the same skills my parents once mocked. Crafting stories, designing costumes, reusing cardboard to make castles. Every tool I needed had always been with me. They just never saw the magic in it. Friday afternoon I got another letter. This time a real one in my mailbox. My name handwritten in shaky script. I opened it slowly. Claire, I don't know what to say anymore. We didn't think this would hurt you the way it clearly did. Your father is too proud to write, but I'm not. I'm sorry we failed you. I see now that we measured the wrong things. We thought we were protecting you. I hope it's not too late. It wasn't signed with love. Just, Mom. So it stunned me. Not because it made everything better. But because it admitted at last that something had been wrong. I didn't respond. Not yet. I placed the letter in the same box where I kept Sophie's card, the newspaper article, the glitter star one of my students had glued to my desk on the first day. They didn't define me anymore. But they were still part of the story. That weekend I hosted our first parent day at the center. My students came in costumes. Pirates, wizards, aliens, and cardboard helmets. They performed a short play we wrote together called The Girl Who Found Her Voice. One of the mothers leaned over to me after the show and whispered, "You really have something special here." I smiled. Not politely. Not modestly. Fully. Because for the first time I believed her. It was a quiet Wednesday evening when my phone rang. Not a text. Not an email. An actual phone call. An increasingly rare sound in my life. I glanced at the screen. Nancy Dawson. I let it ring out. A few minutes later it rang again. This time, Richard Dawson. Then Emily. One after another. I didn't answer. Not yet. I sat at my small kitchen table, lights dimmed, a cup of tea cooling beside me. Outside, the city was coated in that late winter dusk, soft and gray, like everything was waiting to thaw. An hour later, I received a voicemail. It was Mom. Claire. Her voice wavered like she was trying to keep it steady and couldn't. "I know you may never want to speak to us again. And after everything, maybe you shouldn't. But your father and I, we read the letter from your attorney. We went through the mediation. We didn't fight it. We know what we did. But what hurts more than the money, more than the embarrassment, is realizing we've missed out on you. You were there. All those years. And we just didn't see you. I don't know if we ever really did." She paused, took a shaky breath. "I saw a photo of you online. You were wearing wings, standing with a group of children, smiling like you'd never needed us to begin with. But I know that's not true. Everyone needs someone. We just weren't there when it counted. We were wrong. And I'm sorry." I sat there frozen, phone still in hand, the words hanging in the air like smoke. I replayed the voicemail once, twice. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I did. For the first time I believed she meant every word. But meaning it didn't erase the past. And I didn't owe forgiveness just because someone finally asked for it. I didn't respond that night. Instead, I went to bed with my windows cracked open and the city sounds drifting in. There was no dramatic music, no fade to black. Just breath. Stillness. Weeks passed. Then one bright morning in early March, as the last of the snow melted off the sidewalks and kids rushed into the community center with paper crowns and cardboard shields, I received another envelope. This time it was from Sophie. Inside was a photo she'd drawn of two fairies, one tall, one small, flying over a school made of clouds. Underneath, in big block letters, she'd written, "When I grow up, I want to fly like you." My heart cracked open. That evening I sat at my desk and wrote a letter. It wasn't long. It wasn't poetic. But it was mine. "Dear Mom and Dad, thank you for the apology. It matters. I don't know what comes next, but I do know this. I'm no longer who I was. And that's not your failure. It's my becoming. Take care, Claire." I didn't sign it with love. Just Claire. That felt right. A week later, our Little Wings program was featured in a local magazine. The headline read, "The Woman Who Turned Glitter into Grace." The article talked about my work, my story, my students. And for once, the story wasn't about what I'd lost. It was about what I'd built. I closed the laptop and looked out the window. Spring was almost here. A girl in a tutu skipped down the sidewalk. A man on a bike zoomed by. The world was moving, humming, becoming. And so was I.